going to talk about the video on nationalism, and which will ultimately lead you to the unification of Italy and Germany. Before we do that, we need to talk about a few things. What should you be loyal to? Okay, this question came across when we were doing the Dark Ages, and we talked about the feudal system where there was a manor and you were loyal to your lord of the manor, and if you were a knight, you would fight for him. If you were a peasant, you would farm for him. If you were a serf, you will basically work and do whatever he says and die for him. Now again, in today's age and time, whom should your loyalty lie to? Your caste? Events in the recent past in Gujarat basically says you shouldn't. Tribe, I don't think much of tribe system is still there, other than those which you have in your class and all that. Religion, we already came across that in the Crusades. Give me all your God, cause God wills it. Boss, again to the idea of feudalism, and yeah, some people would say boss is always right, but not really. Now, nation. So, should you be more loyal towards your nation? Before we go there, we need to understand what is a nation. Now, the idea of a nation state basically is that the people of a common region get together and form a political entity called the nation state. Now, how do you form these nation states? You can't just randomly get together and form a nation state. So, what's a nation state? The idea comes up with people sharing the same culture, a shared way of life, people following a same religion, at least most of the people, and they get together to make a country. People sharing common beliefs, belief in common ethnic descent, which may or may not be true, like we belong to the same ancestry, or people belonging to a same territory, that we all those people living in this region are basically one people. Or maybe language, we all share the same language. That idea brings in people together. Or a common past, that is history. All these things together merge together and make a nation. Now we need to think how this idea came across. Okay, how did this entire idea of nation state suddenly pop up into somebody's brains? If you look into history, especially the Western history that we have been studying, you will come across the American history, in which the 13 colonies got together and created something called these United States, which later on became the United States. Right? If you look at them at that point of time, they were all from different parts of Europe, and they had hardly anything in common other than they were all from the colonies which were in the northern Americas and towards the eastern coast of Northern America, and all of them belonged to the Empire of Great Britain, and they all had a grudge with Great Britain. So that's what brought them together. When that one threat was taken off, again there were issues between them. So many people say that it was the Civil War that actually created the United States. Okay, fine. So after that, the idea of a nation state came across the ocean into France, and we all know about the French Revolution. Over there, they tried to unify their nation based on language. French became the national language, and a particular dialect which was more popular in and around Paris was enforced upon everybody else. In fact, if you look at that, Napoleon himself was not a native French speaker. He was a Corsican, I believe. I'm not so sure. We can find it out. But he was not a native French speaker. He later on learned French, or rather was, that was forced into his head later. Anyway, now when we come to the idea of a nation state, another idea is religion. To name a few nations which have been brought together with the idea of religion, one is Pakistan, of course. Another in modern memories is Israel. The people in these countries basically are together because they follow a common faith, common religion. Okay, we talked about the idea of nationalism. Now we are going to talk about the kinds of nationalism. Now there are many nationalistic forces. There is nationalism which is a force of unification, nationalism which is a force of separation, right, or disunification. The first one obviously stands for unification. It's a merger of politically divided but culturally united places. Like, I'll give you an example. Uh, Say, for example, India after independence. We had the areas which were under the British dominion, and then we had the what we term as Desi Rajwadas, the princely states, which were unified to create a political entity known as India, or the Republic of India as we call it today. Similarly, then there is the idea of separation. Culturally distinct groups resist being added to or to a state, or tries to break away from one. Like, let's say Ireland. Ireland is a nation today. It's got separated from the United Kingdom, right? But initially, it used to be a part of the United Kingdom. Okay, uh, Northern Ireland, which is still with Britain, there is a movement over there which is trying to get separated from the rest of Britain. So that basically comes into separation. Uh, then we come to state building. The culturally distinct groups form into a new state by accepting a single culture. That idea basically comes across very nicely in the idea of United States of America. And even their motto, which goes like, from many, one, is exemplifying the idea of people from different cultures getting together to form one single culture. Like, the people from many different various backgrounds who have come down to the USA, and now they have formed one nation. The same idea applies to great extent even to India. Okay, and we're going to the next level, where we are going to talk about the positive and negative aspects of nationalism. Now, the positive aspects were that people within a nation came together for a common cause, and people getting together, common objectives, and collaborating is always a good idea. uh, Overthrow of colonial rule, you get this in places like India, the African nations, the other Asian nations, South Asian nations such as Vietnam. That's where they basically overthrew colonial rule because of the idea of nationalism. And then the spread of democracy across the world. It may come as a shock to most of you that the situation was actually the other way around. Most of the countries in the world were either monarchies, or else they were a sort of dictatorship, and very few nations of the world were democracies. People did not believe that democracies could work or would work. And it's because of nationalism that the idea of democracy became very strong amongst the nations of the world. And lastly, competition among nations spurring scientific and technological advances. Like, uh, the idea that let my country be the first country to basically explore moon or Mars, or go into the space, basically brought in a lot of benefit for all mankind. On the other hand, you have the negative aspects of nationalism. The first one being forced assimilation of minority culture into the majority culture. Like, when people were forced to follow a particular religion, say for example in Great Britain, the idea of forcing people to join Protestant Christianity and trying to eradicate and erase Catholic Christians, right? Then ethnic cleansing. One example is Holocaust, uh, wherein Hitler tried to wipe off all the Jews from Europe. The next one is rise of extreme nationalistic movement, which the best example would be the Nazis or the fascists, namely in Italy and Germany. And the next one is competition among the nations, leading to tensions and war among them. That's what actually led to the First World War, which we're going to talk about in one of the upcoming videos, right? So, positive and negative, like we say, every coin has two sides. So nationalism also has two sides, and that's basically what we are concluding with.